Well, hello, besties. Where y'all at? I see a couple people watching right now. Hello, happy Monday. Welcome in. I'm gonna spend a few minutes just rambling while more people pull up because I actually have a word for y'all today, and I want people to hear it without having to repeat myself a million times. So, in the meantime, I would love to know how you are all doing. How was your weekend? How was your Christmas week? If you celebrate, or Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, or any other holidays, the solstice. How's your week been? Mine's been pretty chill. I am totally off of any routines and schedules that I've been on, but it feels good to just be vibing and doing things when I feel like doing things. So that's been nice. I went for a nice long bike ride yesterday and microdosed with a little bit of shroomy tea, and that made me feel wonderful and reset my brain. So I feel inspired. Robin says, hello. Hi, Robin. Stressful, but okay. You know what? Stressful, but okay will do. Glad that you made it through the stress and you're able to relax. At least I hope you're able to relax. Um, yeah, it's a weird time depending on who you are and what you got going on, but you know how it is. I'm shuffling some cards just for me. I may or may not share them with everybody. But I want to see if there's anything else, any other insights I can pull from these cards. But I have a couple of notes that I wrote down about today's new moon for you guys. So, hey, Daria. Welcome in. Good to see you. Yeah, so I am just calling on a little bit more insight to some of the thoughts that I'm having about today's lunation. So, yeah. And if you have any questions for me, I would love for you to leave them in the chat. In the meantime, I do have some announcements. Most we've already talked about. As you know, I do have a 30% sale on all of my readings going on through the end of the week. So use code HOLIDAY for 30% off of any reading until January 2nd. You can book up to, I believe you can book up to 2 months in advance. So if you have a birthday in January or February and maybe even part of March, and you want to book a reading with me for then and get a little bit of a discount on it, just enter that code at checkout. Go to my booking website that is mixmercury.as.me. That's mxmercury.as.me. Oh my God, I already forgot. And you can book a reading there. And then I also have my Astrotherapy 101 workshop coming up January 26th. The booking link for that is also in my workshop. However, the 30% discount code does not work for the workshop code. However, if you are a member of my Patreon channel, you do get $5 off. So full 50% off discount on that workshop. So it will be just $5 for Patreons, $10 for everyone else. I hope to see you then. Other than that, let's get into this. Let's get into this reading. All right. What can we glean? What's some insight we can glean from this new moon in Sagittarius today? Well. Okay. I will reveal my cards later. I'll reveal them now. I won't interpret them now, but I'll reveal them now so you can have them on your mind. So on the bottom of the deck we have our glorious Emperor card. Da, 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 da. And the card that I pulled was the Page of Cups, which I think is very cute. I think it fits. I think it fits for some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to set those aside. We will revisit those later. Hi, Lo. Happy new moon. It's been overstimulating having other holidays masked at home, but cheers to this being the last week of Mercury and Scorpio. Hallelujah. Listen, I'm over it. I am over Mercury being in Scorpio. I feel like it's made me very asocial, just emotionally distant. I'm a little too comfortable alone right now, and I think it's time to switch it up. So, looking forward to Mercury finishing its extra long stay in Scorpio. Okay, let's get into this new moon. So, I was thinking today, after my client this morning, that it's very easy for us to get into negative thought patterns or negative holding patterns about relationships. Especially if you've experienced a lot of distress or conflict in relationships in your life, it's easy to think that relationships and even love, right, in whatever sense of the word, are these like negative things or these uncomfortable things or these very risky, like, is it even worth it for me to bother? If you've mostly had tumultuous relationships. And I can say for myself, having Venus and Jupiter in Scorpio, that, yeah, I tend to be kind of scared of people and kind of scared of relationships. I've especially noticed this recently because I'm really becoming aware of my own emotional unavailability and how self-protective I am, right? So, curious if you are all feeling a same way or a similar way, or just what your relationship to being in relationships is like, right? Well, the reason I bring that up is because Venus is doing a lot, Jupiter and Taurus is doing a lot at this new moon. One reason is because Jupiter is the ruler of the sign Sagittarius. So, anytime planets are moving through Sagittarius, we are dealing with Jupiter in real time and in our own charts, our natal Jupiter placement. And with the new moon in Sagittarius in particular, we're talking about our beliefs and beliefs in a very general sense. So, not just religion, not just spirituality or politics or these larger branches of belief systems. I just mean like literally your thought patterns, what you tend to believe, how you orient yourself towards the world. So, beliefs can look like narratives that you carry and that you project onto other things. And this kind of determines your outlook and disposition and also your actions, like the way that you move through certain situations based on this preconceived notion or prejudice or bias that you have. So these are all Sagittarius things. What makes it Sagittarius, like we talked about last week, is that there's usually some kind of action or desire to change something outside of you in order to kind of fit your beliefs or your narratives, which is why we get into the whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing. If you believe and anticipate a certain thing to be true, you're going to kind of unconsciously find ways to validate that truth, even if you don't necessarily want to. Of course, propaganda and indoctrination fit into this lens as well. So there may be beliefs that you have that you're not even aware that you have until you're in a situation where you are confronted with that belief and the consequences of that. So that's kind of what we're working with. And at new moons are basically like the beginning of something new. It's kind of self-explanatory in the name. Once you hit a new moon in a sign, something about your relationship and the ways that you embody that sign are changing moving forward. And that's because, every new moon, whatever the ruler of that new moon is, varies from year to year. So it changes the context of your relationship to that house. In this case, the context of your Sagittarius house changes because Jupiter is in Taurus, which is where we get into relationships. So I'm going to pause there. I want to see what y'all are saying over here. Clocking my tea already. Okay, period. Let's get into it. This is a lot of a self-read too, mind you. So this year is the first year me and my long-term, like 8-ish years mutuals did a gift exchange for Christmas, and it was so cute. We also started doing the Wednesday waffle thing since Thanksgiving. That's really cute. So you have like a new tradition and a new, rituals, maybe a word as well, communal ritual and routine with each other. I think that's very sweet. Yeah, it gives you something to look forward to for sure. I've always been skeptical about my standing in relationships, but doing these things makes me feel closer to them off of the timeline. Okay, perfect. Yes, this is a great way. This is a great like segue into the next piece. So, thinking about negative thought patterns in relationships. Um this when I talk about negative thought patterns and this whole thing of like expecting or anticipating people to behave a certain way, or yourself rather to behave a certain way in relationships, um I think at this time it's more about the expectations that we have for ourselves in relationships. Of course, that can be based on your identity or the roles that you expect yourself to play in your relationships. Also, like the identities of the people involved in the relationship. Easiest way to think about it, gender roles or family roles and things like that. Um, Sometimes those negative thought patterns are reflective of the thoughts and expectations that we have of ourselves. So, are there any relationships that you're in where what's expected of you in that relationship makes you feel shitty about yourself? Or alternatively, are there roles and expectations in your relationship that make you feel good about yourself? And depending on where you fall in that spectrum between feeling great about yourself in this relationship and feeling shitty about yourself in this relationship, how much is that related to you being able to measure up to a certain expectation of someone else in the relationship dynamic, or just like your own expectations of yourself in that relationship dynamic? Um, and how does that contribute to your negative or positive thought patterns? You know, how does that contribute to your feeling of belonging in that relationship as well? Part of the reason I'm talking about expectations and roles and all that kind of stuff is because these are things that Taurus in a general sense represents. So when Jupiter is in Taurus, something that I've realized as this year has gone on, and this perfection year for me in particular has gone on, it's that we have a lot of shoulds about ourselves. We have a lot of expectations about ourselves. A lot of those may not necessarily be ours, from our own minds, but we have a lot of things that we believe we should or shouldn't be doing. And when we aren't measuring up to that expectation, or when someone else isn't measuring up to that expectation, we feel a lot of shame, we feel really discouraged, or we feel really alienated. Um, and it makes the relationship a tumultuous place to be in. So there's a belief that you have about yourself in relationships that is likely informing the way that you show up in that relationship and out in the world. Cool. I guess I'll use another real life example, right? For me, since transitioning especially, I've noticed, this is embarrassing to admit, but I've noticed that I'm kind of afraid to get into another relationship with a woman, even though I've only dated women most of my life, all of my life. Cishet women in particular. Well, it's not cishet women, but cis women, some cishet women, but cis women in general is mostly like what I've dated. Most of my friends are women. Like I'm surrounded by women in my family life. I'm familiar with women, and since transitioning, I'm like scared to be in relationships with women now. That has nothing to do with women. I mean, a little tiny bit to do with women, but a lot to do with, again, my own personal lived experience, but also the expectation that I have of myself as a man and specifically as a trans man in relationships. Part of it is that I really don't know what to expect of myself in relationships with women now because I haven't been in a relationship with a woman as a trans man. So there's room for me to kind of create and reimagine what those relationships could be like. But as it stands, and just kind of hearing in general, whether it's from podcast bro culture or just from um, internet culture, TikToks, reels, whatever it is, like people have expectations, certain expectations of at least cishet men in relationships for being the providers, for being, um, I don't know, defenders and protectors and all of this stuff. This very gendered expectation of men in relationships that I'm kind of like, what does that mean to me? I don't know. What does being a provider or a protector in a relationship mean to me? Is that even like something that I see of myself? Typically, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I'm pretty sensitive. I'm lived most of my life as a woman. So my expectations of partners and relationships are really not normative, like I kind of don't care about all that stuff. We should both provide and protect for each other. No, like I want a partnership, right? So all of that to say, it has made doing something as simple as creating a Bumble account and swiping through, actually trying to find partners, seem really complicated, because now I'm very aware of myself and all of the ways that I kind of don't conform or don't assimilate to societal expectations, right? So whenever I talk about negative thought patterns, that's kind of what I mean. I have a belief about an expectation of myself in relationships, especially related to my identity, that makes me feel like I don't know if I want to do that, because somehow I'm going to have to self abandon, or I'm going to have to fit into this role or this archetype that I don't really know if that's me. Cool. So, expanding out even further, um, is where we start talking about Venus in Aquarius now. Because remember last week, Venus was still in Capricorn, but now Venus has moved on to the sign Aquarius, and in a conjunction in the same sign as Saturn, we're in a situation where we're allowed to self determine and reimagine our relationships, especially as it fits our concept of ourself, independent of what other people think about us. So, how you see yourself really informs how you perceive your relationships and yourself in relationships right now. A little bit different than it usually does. I'm going to pause there. I want to see what y'all are saying in the chat. The pandemic has made me feel very confused about relationships, so I don't even know. But I guess I'm finding solace now in not being emotionally unavailable to myself, but trying to learn more about non attachment. I'm very curious about that. Tell me more about that and what non attachment means to you, because that might actually be relevant to this conversation, but I'm not totally sure how just yet. I love that X can relate to that. Hey Daria, I've been trying to connect more offline with people off the TL. It's definitely been an eye opener. That was between y'all. Sorry. Skeptical, like forgettable. If I don't reach out, will they? But after voicing, like I would like to deepen our relationship, and they agreed. Um, okay, so basically, like skeptical of relationships in the way that one of your beliefs is, if you don't reach out, will they reach out to you, or is it always going to be you extending the hand? But then after voicing that, you've realized that people are invested in deepening their relationship with you. That's a very real one. And honestly, if you are this type of person who feels like you're always reaching out, it's totally okay if you don't reach out sometimes, you know, if you just want to see, not to test people, but if you just want to see how long maybe it takes somebody to come around, or even if they do come around, like no need in overextending yourself if you feel like it's always on you, and, have a deeper conversation about it. Don't just make assumptions. Don't conform to societal expectations. Very real. That's why regarding dating, if I don't know you from around, I doubt what time I'm on is going to translate via the apps. This is also a big issue that I'm having, because it's like I've noticed, right? Like I've mentioned before, being on the boy apps just like casually, because I really don't date men. I have no desire to date men, but we can do other things. I don't really care. And I find that to be, hey Samaje, I find that to be easier because I don't have an expectation of myself in those relationships other than this particular, temporary moment of consensual pleasure, ideally. And even then, I don't have a lot of expectations of myself there, because for whatever reason, I don't see, like, my identity, I guess, isn't, that's an interesting thing for me to say out loud, but like, I don't know, my identity doesn't really feel like it's in question whenever I'm dealing with other men or gay men or whatever. It's just kind of like inconsequential to me. And I can be very transparent and very like straightforward, and it's like no big deal. But whenever it comes to women, where I would actually like to invest in the relationship, now I'm like stressed. So I don't know. It's different, right? So back to Venus in Aquarius. Again, Venus in Aquarius, hooked up with Saturn right now, in charge of Jupiter and Taurus. Jupiter and Taurus in charge of the new moon, or the new moon rather, in charge of Jupiter and Taurus. Um, because gay men don't see trans men as men. I mean, a lot of them don't. A lot of them don't, and if they do, we haven't had like deeper conversations about it, but that is definitely part of it. I just kind of don't care what they think, though, I guess is the point, because I'm not really invested in a deeper, more intimate relationship there. and a lot of them aren't either. So that's what I mean by inconsequential. It's like we're both just trying to have shallow encounters and move on. But in situations where like I do want to be seen, because I could say the same for women, you know, cishet women, lesbians, whoever. A lot of times they don't see trans men as men either. So it's like they think they're getting a super butch or super stud lesbian and then treat you that way based on your body parts, when it's like, no, that's not what this is either. So it gets complicated. And because I've had so many different relational experiences even before transitioning, I like kind of don't know what to expect from people anymore, because people will say one thing and that they believe one thing and want one thing and do something completely different, really just depending on the person they're involved with. So it just makes it hard to know what to expect. But all of that to say, uh being now in this situation where the sky, whatever you want to call it, is allowing us to imagine or reimagine what relationships look like, what our expectation for ourselves is like in relationship, or other people's expectations. We're able to ask, like, through reimagining this relationship, how does that allow me to see myself differently? How does that allow me to have different expectations of myself? How does that allow me to navigate my relationships in a different way? And this can be anybody. This can be your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your friends, with partners, with other family members. And a lot of it is about having and really standing firm in the person that you see yourself as and the person that you want to be, the person that you believe yourself to be, because it's easy to betray yourself in relationships purely because you want to be in relationship and to connect with other people. We do this all the time. It's very common. It's easy to abandon yourself and try to fit into somebody else's vision of you, or to embody the projections that are cast onto you. And then you end up in relationships where, again, you don't feel very good about them or about yourself or about even the other person. And now everybody is kind of having a question of not knowing who anybody is or what anybody wants. And thus enters the negative thought pattern. The other part of this is Mars is still in Cancer. We haven't really talked about Mars in Cancer for a while because this is just fucking hanging out there for a while. But Mars is going to move into Gemini soon, and that's also relevant to this conversation. But as far as Mars in Cancer being the ruler of today's new moon in Sagittarius, I think there's a lot of that whole like wanting instant relief or wanting to avoid discomfort a little bit that is driving our behaviors right now. And, on the one hand, it is wanting to avoid discomfort. On the other hand, it's also being driven by your discomfort or your desire for a certain outcome or a certain dynamic in a relationship. And that either that desire for relief or the discomfort, or whatever it is that is motivating you to take action, is also allowing your beliefs to change, because you're kind of having to embody your beliefs one way or the other. Like, if you really believe that you'd rather just be alone, then avoiding the discomfort of being in a relationship is just going to drive you further into the belief that you're better off alone, right? Alternatively, if you really want to be in a relationship, you're going to take steps to avoid loneliness and therefore move into some kind of a relationship dynamic that feels good to you, if that's what you really desire. So there's something about the pressure of however you're feeling emotionally about relationships that's driving you to change your beliefs and thought patterns about who you are and what it means to be in a relationship. And then through the experiences that you have that basically contradict whatever beliefs that you originally had, that's what allows your perspective to change. And I tend to believe that perspective changes beliefs. Aquarius and Sagittarius, they actually have an okay relationship with each other. Air and fire. Aquarius as an air sign, Sagittarius as a fire sign. They both work together to do exactly what I just said, like shift your perspective and therefore take different actions based on that new perspective. They allow each other to expand their perspectives, to broaden your horizons or whatever it is. They can inflate and kind of hype each other up at the same time, they can also combust. So you can definitely take one idea, one belief, whatever it is, too far in one direction and it work against you. But ultimately, when you have a really strong belief, or if we use a stronger word, indoctrination, or even if we think about propaganda, the whole thing about indoctrination and propaganda is it's teaching you to look at something or to think a certain way about something in one way. Religion, always a great example of this. Whatever the religious doctrines are, if you deviate from those at all, if with, let's say, Christianity, you're going to hell. It's like very black or white, right? But if you don't believe in Christianity and then you learn about something else, some other religious process, or even within Christianity, you can go from like Old Testament Christianity to New Testament Christianity, where now all of a sudden all of your sins are forgiven and all you have to do is ask for forgiveness and accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and now suddenly you're not going to hell even if you make mistakes, right? um Same thing with like political propaganda. If you've only ever heard one story about Israel, then you would think Zionism is an appropriate response until you hear the other side of the story, the perspective of Palestinian people, where you're like, oh, actually, maybe none of these people are actually supposed to be here at all. And this is like land theft, right? So obviously examples of having a really strong belief and perspective about one thing and then getting new information from a different source or from the other side of the situation and realizing, oh, there's more to this than what I thought. So when you're trying to do that with your own beliefs about something, especially whenever it comes to relationships, that's where conversation is really important. Like understanding what the other person believes and thinks and expects of you, of that relationship, whatever it is, of the dynamic, that's going to give you more information about really just kind of what's going on. That's where I think Mercury entering Sagittarius later this weekend will finally be of some help, because right now, while Mercury's still in Scorpio for the 40th day and night, um, Mercury is in opposition to Jupiter, which again, Jupiter in Taurus is saying something about the ways that we assimilate um, and take on certain roles and expectations in our relationships that may be contrary to how we actually feel and how we actually see ourselves, or that cause us to engage with the relationship in a way that we feel like we have to leave parts of ourselves behind because they're not accepted. And I think with Scorpio being in the sky, sometimes it does just feel like I need to remove myself. I need to go somewhere else because some part of me is not accepted here. And that tension between wanting to stay and belong and connect versus wanting to protect yourself and protect your feelings and maintain or preserve some aspect of yourself, that tension has really been overwhelming, to say the least. But when Mercury moves into Sagittarius, now it's like, okay, let's talk about what it is that we all think should be happening here. Like, what are the expectations you have of me, and what are the expectations that I have of you? And how does that actually help us see each other more clearly? You know? Hi, Maya. Let me see what y'all are saying over here. I definitely run experience regarding reaching out and adjusting accordingly. Good. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to see kind of what's going on, have some curiosity about it in that way. Man, I wish I could find the thread on X, but there was a thread about detachment weeks back, and I found myself relating more to what folks were saying regarding non-attachment. Yes. Okay. So, let me see what the rest of you said. I guess trying to work out. I guess trying to work through how I can still connect to people I care about right now who aren't in the same emotional reality as me with the pandemic without losing myself sense of self. Still processing. Yes. Yes. Specifically family members for sure. Okay, yeah, so let's talk about detachment, because detachment is something that comes up a lot with Aquarius placements that I think is kind of misunderstood, or maybe we just don't have great language for it. But for me, when I think about detachment, detachment to me is different than non-attachment. And I know that sounds like a semantics battle, and for the most part it is. But from what I've studied regarding like Buddhism, right? Non-attachment, and I think the reason they call it non-attachment is because you are releasing an expectation. you're both releasing an expectation of something. You're not attached to a specific outcome or to a specific expectation. And therefore, that allows you to have more acceptance of something for what it is. And acceptance doesn't mean that you allow it and need to stay close to it or need to stay involved with it, because, again, non attachment. Accepting something for what it is just means you're seeing it soberly. You're seeing it as it exists and not trying to make it into something else. That allows you to then decide for yourself what to do with that information, you know? So to me, non-attachment is all about acceptance, just accepting something for what it is and then navigating accordingly, or, you know, adjusting accordingly. Whereas detachment to me, and this is just my opinion, detachment to me kind of implies like either a total removal or disregard, or just like, I don't know. Detachment to me kind of implies that there is, I guess detachment to me seems like more of an action, like the action of detaching yourself. So I don't think it's something that you necessarily stay in. You know, I think non-attachment is the philosophy, and detachment is the action of releasing the expectation, you know. But the way that I've heard people talk about detachment specifically is kind of dissociative to me. It's like you're not really latching onto anything. You're not really almost even like paying attention. You're just kind of detached. I don't know. I just don't like it. I'll just say that. That's my bias. I think there's a difference between, again, the acceptance of something for what it is, someone for who they are, versus just like being uninvolved, being detached, leaving it over there, removing yourself, going far away. I just think those are different things. And I also think that dissociation, like sometimes with detachment as dissociation, there is like still a resistance to acknowledging what something is, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'm maybe I'm getting caught up on verbiage, but all of that to say, I think you can still be attached in a sense, like just attachment as a fundamental reality of relationships. I think you can still be in relationship with people and not be attached to your projection onto that person or your expectation or belief of that person, which is kind of like at the heart of everything that I'm saying, because perspective changes your belief, right? So to use like the whole um emotional reality thing, to me, non-attachment in that situation would be kind of, would one be releasing the idea that you're going to convince anybody else that the pandemic is real, if they've already shown you time and time again that they simply don't believe the pandemic is still going, or that, you know, COVID is still an issue, or whatever it is. It's kind of a waste of your energy after a while to constantly try and convince and to get them to be on your side of reality, or to believe what you believe, basically. And Sagittarius likes to do that. That's kind of the purpose of that sign, is to get other people to, at the very least, see and understand what it is that you believe, and to come to some kind of consensus around what the truth is, and to operate based on that. That's the same purpose of propaganda, is to get you to believe what I believe. That way we can be operating in the same truth. But, you know, through this convoluted set of planets right now, ultimately we are trying to just accept that your reality is your reality and my reality is my reality, and they can coexist in the same way that multiple religions can coexist without everybody needing to believe what the other person believes. Um it's difficult though, because you do have to obviously find ways in the practical sense. Then you have to find ways um to make it work for everybody. And that's kind of the benefit of Taurus as well as an earth sign. What are some practical measures we can take to get along? When planets enter Capricorn again soon, to work with Taurus on that, it's more like, okay, what are some practical measures we can implement, or practical ways that we can still connect despite having different beliefs or existing in different realities? It's not easy, but it's possible. A lot of that does involve, like we were saying, non-attachment, releasing some kind of expectation that it's going to be exactly what you want it to be. At least that's how I kind of think about it. So, um, detachment to feelings is feeling majorly indifferent after viciously caring for a minute. But I agree, I don't like that word that much. Yeah, it's like I just think of it as a release. Um it's a release in the sense that you are no longer trying to change something outside of you, change someone else basically. Let them be who they are. And because in that case, the only thing you can control, going back to the whole cardinal sign theme of it, the only thing you can control is how you show up in that relationship. So if you stay in the relationship constantly thinking, I have to convince these people to believe me, to agree with me, to think the same as me, like that's a lot of wasted energy on something that, people change because people want to change. You can appeal to their values and you can appeal to their beliefs and illuminate the ways that what you believe and what they believe have common threads. You can absolutely do that. But to spend all of your energy trying to get somebody to see something that they just can't see for themselves for whatever reason can just further create more of that gap and that divide to where now detachment looks like I'm just straight up not in this relationship anymore. Just straight up not connected to this person anymore or attached to this relationship anymore. And I don't personally think that that's always healthy. Sometimes, yeah, you need to get the fuck out and move on. But in some cases, it's just better to release the expectation that you have, do what you need to do to stay, to preserve yourself, to be yourself, and to allow that person to be themselves and find other ways to relate and connect. So there's that. Those are my thoughts on attachment and non-attachment, because I actually think non-attachment in relationships is very healthy. And in fact, there's a book that we had to read for my relationship school course called Already Free by Bruce Tift. I think it's Bruce Tift. And it takes like a psychological, like a Western psychology lens on traditional Buddhism or Eastern perspectives on relationships and combines them in a way that to me seems very authentic and very much, and like it creates more um harmony in relationships in a way that's not like spiritual bypassing, because to me detachment can also be spiritual bypassing. A lot of people don't like that, but non-attachment is just accepting the situation for what it is, navigating accordingly. I sound like a broken record, but yeah. And if and sometimes it is the case that in order for me to accept you as you are, I can't be in this relationship because there's going to be some part of me that's constantly reaching to change you, or some part of me that feels like I have to abandon myself in order to stay. And if you just feel like there's no other way to be in that relationship for whatever reason, then it's totally fine for you to move on, but that's a decision and a choice that you have to make based on the information and energy that you have, I guess. Hello to Maya and hello to Eric. Welcome in. Um, the Catholic guilt has been beating my ass lately, and I have to actively work on getting out of black and white thinking and self-shaming. Absolutely. Yeah. Inherited Catholic guilt, for sure. That makes hella sense. Thank you. Yeah, for sure. I'm liking non-attachment more or trying to get there instead of the dissociation of detachment. So the emotional, shout out to the emotional work. Yeah. That's the other part of it, why I kind of brought Mars and Cancer into this as well, because there's a lot of grief surrounding that too, like whenever someone isn't who you wanted or expected them to be or who you projected them to be or whatever, or just like seeing other aspects of people that don't feel so good. It does make you uncomfortable. It also makes you have to confront whether that's something you feel like you can live with, or if it's something that you really need some distance from in order for the relationship to survive. It's like a lot of children parent dynamics. Sometimes your relationship with those parents is better whenever you are far away from them, when there's some distance in the relationship. It doesn't mean that you're completely detached from them. In my opinion, my use of the word, it doesn't mean you're detached from them. It just means there's some space, which, might I add, air signs are good for that as well. Some space, some distance between um you and them, so that you're not dealing with them every single day and constantly having to deal with all of the things, like being up close to something, just feels like it's hard to separate yourself. Whereas when there's actual physical distance, you're not as enmeshed, which, is kind of a form of detachment, maybe, or non-attachment or whatever. But I think that fits in this conversation as well. You have to kind of release your own emotional addiction, for lack of a better way to put it, or emotional pattern, maybe is more appropriate word, to say like, okay, instead of getting on the roller coaster with this person that I know is going to end a certain way, I'm going to get off the roller coaster. You can be off the roller coaster and watch the roller coaster continue away from you without needing to be in the front seat, like going headfirst down the hill or whatever. You can take a back seat or just get off the roller coaster completely, right? Feeling that acceptance heightened with this new moon. Literally just said my energy needs to be spent differently for the sake of my safety, relationships, to put more motion into moving out. Absolutely. And it's also beneficial for your health as well. I'm gonna have the door open. Sorry if y'all can hear it in the background. But yeah, it's also more beneficial to your health to get off of the emotional roller coaster too. Like, it's stressful trying to constantly change somebody, trying to constantly be understood, trying to constantly be believed and be seen and all of this stuff by people who just don't, you know? So then we're back to reimagining relationships and our expectations of ourselves and of other people. It's like, if you're expecting yourself, like I'm really bad about this. I always expect myself to be empathetic and understanding, like to the extent that I leave out my own subjective experience and feelings in relationships. So now I've become so understanding of the other person and their situation that I lost empathy for myself. And then it becomes one-sided, where I'm constantly holding and being the container for the other person's feelings and experience, and there's no room for mine to exist. So then that turns into a negative thought pattern that I have about relationships that doesn't need to be there, because who told me that I need to always be the one who's understanding? Who told me that I need to be the one who's always holding space for the other person and that I'm not allowed to wild out? Why am I not allowed to wild out? I probably have an expectation of myself that I don't wild out. That's not what I do. Whenever it's perfectly normal and healthy and sometimes even necessary to wild out. Because how is anybody else ever going to know that that you also have the capacity to wild out? How is anybody else going to know that you also how, or rather put it this way, somebody else's like thoughts about you, well, this is a read, but somebody else's thoughts about you are not going to change if you yourself don't change and show up differently. They're always going to maintain the same expectation of you if you always show up the same way. So of course people are going to think of me as somebody who, is always so understanding and always so accepting and always so this and that, because that's all I've ever done. I haven't shown them the ways that sometimes I have to stand up and say like, hey, I don't like that shit, and actually I don't understand it. Why are you doing that? What's going on? Got to change the narrative. Exactly. See, y'all get it. Y'all are catching on. So if my expectation for myself doesn't change, then nobody else's expectation of me is going to change, and vice versa. It goes both ways. Oh, that woke y'all up. I see y'all over here in the chat. Teehee. Wow, it is definitely an emotional pattern or addictions with the emotional roller coaster. I'm hopping off. Love that analogy. Yes. Yeah. A lot of people don't love the phrasing of emotional addiction, but to be honest, like if we go back to Mars and Cancer being the ruler of this new moon in Sag, right? If you are a person, and I say this with no judgment because it's also me, but if you are the type of person, and it's all of us living in America, right? Like election season is a perfect example of something that we collectively experience. That is like, we know that every 4 years, everybody's going to lose their shit over who should be the president. This is going to happen. It is woven into the fabric of society. And that it's going to be polarizing. It's going to be emotionally volatile. That it's going to be chaotic. And it's going to bring up a lot of uncomfortable feelings and debates with people. You have the option to, opt out. And when I say opt out, I don't mean ignore it. I don't mean totally detach and pretend it's not happening. But I mean, you don't have to, quote tweet and respond to every single person who disagrees with you on the internet just because it's election season and we have to pay attention to politics. But you might be in the habit of doing that because your nervous system is kind of already revved up for that. This is the whole like context thing. Like if you're in a context that feels like it's gonna hype you up emotionally and you are used to being in that state as far as your nervous system goes, like if you are habituated to chaos, maybe is one way to put it, because our society is chaotic, then it's gonna be unfamiliar to opt out of the chaos and to kind of just sit by and watch the roller coaster without you being on it. It's gonna feel like I should be on that roller coaster. I should, I should, I can't. I can't keep my thoughts to myself. I should get on the roller coaster. It's all I know. And it's like, what if instead of feeding the chaos gremlin inside of you, that you told the chaos gremlin, like, hey, so what if instead of watching Jubilee videos where the worst people on earth are having debates about really high consequence topics, what if instead we played a video game? Then I still get my chaos fix. I can still feed the chaos gremlin some chaos, but it's not like gonna send me into a depressive episode. Right? So, instead of when my family member, wants to start projecting their beliefs onto me, instead of engaging them in a debate that I know is not going to go anywhere, I just say, there's actually, okay, so using this as a real example, there's actually two ways you could go about this, and y'all aren't going to like this, but bear with me. Me and my dad were talking about this on Christmas. Whenever your family member has some beliefs that you disagree with, right? Or your partner, whoever it is, has some beliefs that you disagree with, and you know that relationship is not one that you necessarily want to cut off completely, since that's kind of what we're talking about, and you want to practice non-attachment, you know what you can do instead? Start to get more curious about what they think and why they believe that. Instead of trying to center your thoughts and beliefs and feelings into the conversation and stand up for that really young part of yourself that was never really able to stand up for themselves, what if instead you say, okay, let's not talk about what I think and what I believe. Just pick the other person's brain and let them get it all out and say whatever they want to say and ask them questions. And if you just really want to ask them questions about how their thoughts contradict each other, you can do that too. That's kind of expert level. I don't always advise that, but it's like setting your beliefs aside in that urge to convince someone else of what is true. Just find out what they believe. Just ask some questions, pick their brain, and then they feel like they're teaching you something and educating you and influencing you, when really you're kind of like, I'm not taking any of this in, but I'm learning a lot about you. I'm learning a lot about you right now. And sometimes, you never know, you might be pleasantly surprised, but what curiosity does in general, usually for the most part, all people involved, it's going to disarm the situation, because it's less now about anybody trying to be right and more about everybody trying to learn what the other person thinks. Now, granted, you might be the person who's more mature or emotionally regulated or whatever it is to do this. So if you know you're dealing with people like that and they start asking you questions, I would also recommend answering appropriately. And by appropriately, I mean pick and choose what you share with people, right? Because again, the goal is to not get on the emotional roller coaster with people when you know you don't want to be on it. Now, sometimes you're going to do it anyway because you're human, and that's fine. But if you find yourself constantly in a situation where you're on that emotional roller coaster, like, please give yourself the option to not. And if you must stay in conversation, yes, insert curiosity. And then, kind of seeing what happens. So I think about this a lot because I'm definitely a person who in relationships, I love the emotional roller coaster. And I've learned that I actually don't like how that feels. It actually doesn't feel good to me. It's not fun. It's, going back to kind of this whole dissociation aspect of the conversation too, it's like dissociation is like a state of numbness, right? Like you don't feel anything. And in fact, the whole reason dissociation exists as a coping strategy, and mostly largely unconscious coping strategy, is so that you don't feel. Another way that Aquarius and Cancer don't really see each other, because Aquarius is like, I don't really want to feel anything. And Cancer is like, I would like to feel something. Right? So sometimes in order to get out of the dissociative state, like you need anger, or you need grief, or you need ecstasy, euphoria. I don't know, some extreme emotion in some direction to get out of dissociation. So that's, sometimes why people like me tend to enjoy the emotional roller coaster, because it's one extreme in one direction. And at least I'm feeling something instead of just being completely checked out, completely detached, completely spaced out. But back to non-attachment, there's also, again, sometimes you can at least acknowledge that the roller coaster is there, at least acknowledge that the feelings are there, and take a different approach with those feelings. So I don't know if y'all can relate to that, but I got a Mars Saturn opposition in my chart. So I tend to need the extremes to get back in touch with any feeling, and then kind of like temper myself from there. But the work for me is a lot of, okay, I don't have to go into the most extreme version of this feeling. I can dip a toe, dip my feet in, the constant, oh no, the constant auditioning process in relationships is exhausting. Anything that reminds me of that process is an immediate trigger for me to check in with myself and the relationship. Totally. Yeah. Something that I've noticed about myself is that when I'm getting to know somebody new, I realize that I don't like to talk about being an astrologer. So I like absolutely loathe the question, like, so what do you do for work? A lot of times, if I'm just talking to somebody that I don't know if I'm invested in a deeper relationship with them, I just tell them about my testing center job at the community college. I'm like, oh yeah, I work part-time at a testing center. And I just like leave it at that. And then if we start talking more, I'm inevitably going to give myself away because I have lots of thoughts and opinions, and will mention being an astrologer. But how do I talk about being an astrologer? Well, I'm already operating under the assumption that people think astrologers are XYZ thing. Like people have an expectation of what an astrologer is. And a lot of times their expectation is not what an astrologer actually is, but also definitely not what I am. So this introduces another kind of theme between that Aquarius Taurus square that we talked about last week, where your expectation of what I do and my self-determined version of what I do are two different things. And sometimes I'm like, do I really want to explain all of this to this person, or do I just want to kind of like keep them over there? And then there's also just like me expecting that people are going to think I'm weird, or they're going to be judgy or whatever about me being an astrologer. And, that's another thing to deal with. But I find myself feeling some shame about like, I don't have a real job and I don't do this, do that. I've told you about this. So sometimes I'm just like, or what I could do instead is lean more into my Leo and be like, yeah, bitch, I'm an astrologer. Haha, this shit cool as fuck. Aren't you jealous? No, I'm kidding. But there is a way that you can approach these conversations too, with like a strong sense of self and self-esteem that says like, regardless of what anybody else thinks, I think what I do is pretty fucking cool. So I'm going to talk about it and engage with it like I think it's cool. I think about this with masking a lot. Like, I think for me, it's very easy to, I was talking to another client about this last week. I think it's easy for me to go into a social situation with a mask on and automatically take on the projection that I'm a weirdo for still masking. When in reality, what I could actually do is, one, take off that projection and say like, yeah, I'm out here protecting my health. Like I feel pretty good about that. Kind of don't really care what anybody else thinks. I don't need somebody else to do this thing with me in order for me to feel valid doing it. But that's like, you got to practice that shit. You got to practice embodying. This is what I was talking about, embodying your convictions and having like a high sense of self or self-esteem about that, reimagining yourself in that process. Like instead of me just assuming that it's weird for me to do this thing, let me just do this thing and not make it a big thing. Like I'm allowed to feel good about that if I want to. So It really is sometimes necessary to wild out, LOL. Aftercare. Exactly. Got to change the narrative. Check that shit. Somebody got to disrupt the pattern or it's going to keep patterning. Yes, exactly. Wow, exactly. Shout out to my anger this past year and cheers to releasing expectations of myself. Yeah, because you know what? With anger, like we have a weird relationship with anger because a lot of us associate anger with abuse. But in reality, anger is just like sometimes you got to tell people that they have crossed your boundary or that they got you fucked up. How are people gonna know that they got you fucked up if you never get angry? That don't mean you gotta like totally. That doesn't mean you have to become mean and abusive and harmful. You ain't got to do all that to be angry. Sometimes you just got to raise your voice a little bit. Raising your voice is not abuse, in my opinion. Is it? I don't think it is. I think if you're raising your voice and calling people out their name and being emotionally abusive or whatever, but sometimes you snap and you can say, I shouldn't have done that. I was feeling really heated in the moment, but I realized that, that had an impact on you. I'm sorry. I will do better about not doing that. But sometimes you're going to raise your voice. I don't know. Y'all can let me know what y'all think about that. I don't want to take it too far, but even me just feeling like a way about saying that shows that we have a weird relationship with anger. But anger needs to exist because otherwise people gonna walk all over you and not know that they got you fucked up. Sometimes you just got to get a little bit loud. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. But point being, anger is a healthy emotion. It exists for a reason. And honestly, this is why I feel like evil people tend to live so long. Like Trump be so angry. Who is he mad at? His daddy, probably. But taking it out on the rest of us, and that man is still going, still has so much life in whatever drugs he's doing and whatever, but that man just keep going because it's just off gassing constantly all of this anger onto everybody else, and it doesn't feel very good for us. It causes a lot of problems for us, but that man gonna live until who knows how long, unless he dies of a heart attack. There's also that. And then you look at Joe, who like, does he ever get angry? Do we know? And he's just kind of like fading off into obscurity. So I don't know. I think anger, life preserving, carries you on. I have family members like that who are angry at everything and everyone constantly, and they just keep kicking. So I mean, unless you develop hypertension, like the anger would be working for people. I don't know. Um, the yelling at the TL. What are we supposed to do then? Just not pay rent? Pay rent? Tweet like y'all put the gun down. That was so bizarre. I know exactly what you're talking about too. That girl was like, I don't understand the hatred towards landlords. Like, do y'all just expect rent is supposed to be free and nobody pay a mortgage? It's like, yeah. You don't? Why do you want a landlord? I don't understand. Are you in real estate? Is that why? Is that where your bias is coming from? I absolutely love that method for people I'm close to. Yeah, totally. Questions can reveal hella insight. They can. People will tell all over themselves if you just ask a question. And that's a lot of times why people get suspicious of question asking. But if you're genuinely trying to understand, right, you're in your non attachment mode, genuinely trying to understand how and why someone thinks and believes what they believe, it's a pretty useful tool for that. It allows you to stay regulated because you're not expecting yourself to take on their beliefs and ideas, but you are inquiring. Gemini is excellent for that because one thing about Gemini is we don't believe shit. It's not true. We do believe something, but we're less likely to be we're the benefit of Gemini, I won't even personify it, but the benefit of Gemini as a zodiac sign is that you can listen to information and not necessarily embody it, or become it, unless you have a Gemini moon, in which case you really need some boundaries around the information that you take in because it's easy for you to just do that. But you don't have to, right? You can take in information and let it roll off, or take parts of information that you resonate with and leave the rest behind. You can do that. You are allowed. See, I got to tell my Mars and Gemini this every time I speak to maybe not hop on the roller coaster. Maybe. I mean, that would be something to investigate whenever Mars retrogrades back into Gemini, which that actually happens pretty soon. Let me look at the date. Okay, so not that soon, but it'll be here before we know it. Mars retrogrades back into Gemini on January 20th. So since January is effectively tomorrow, it's just a couple weeks away. That curiosity and using new information as a way to reframe your beliefs, I think, is an excellent tool. So, Oh, so I'm really just describing your grief journey right now. Yeah. This was a needed sermon. Work questions make me want to puke, right? Truly, what a time. Wow, needed that reminder regarding masking. It's hard for my 12th house Leo. Time to turn up the creativity. Yeah, totally. It can be intimidation, but sometimes you gotta be okay with that being it because you got me fucked up. That's true regarding raising your voice. Yes, intimidation, that is part of it. Um, it depends. But in general, we'll never forget when me and my coworker were arguing and got called into the office about how harshly we were speaking to each other, and we both looked at each other like, no, we just talk excitedly. That's also very Sagittarius. I can't remember if you have Sag placements, but I feel like the main thing I hear from Sagittarius people is this complaint. This may be something to think about with Mercury and Sagittarius coming up. Is that whole like it's not what you say but how you say it thing? Very much the Jupiter and Taurus influence that like how you say it in tone matters. And I do generally think that's the case. Like tone matters. And sometimes your tone is that you feel very passionate about this thing, or that you feel very excited about this thing, or that you feel very angry about this thing, and your tone is going to reflect it. So if somebody calls out your tone, rather than getting defensive about your tone, maybe ask yourself why that was your tone. Why do I feel that way? Why is this conversation bringing this level of passion and excitement out of me? It's not neutral. It doesn't need to be neutral. That's also a word for Virgo, wherever you are, because I think sometimes Virgo thinks that they're being objective and practical and rational, when really, like, but you got feelings too. You're not fooling me. You're not fooling me. I can hear it in your voice. And in fact, the fact that you're trying not to have an emotion or a tone right now is saying a lot to me about how you feel about the situation. So, hey Jada, that's the same way. No, I have everybody edges in my fist at this moment because I'm on a roll. Um, that's so funny. Yeah. So I don't know. Tone matters. And also, like, you can be intentional, Sag word. You can be intentional with your tone, your inflection, with your voice, that you can still convey anger without raising your voice. That's also possible. You can convey many disappointments, many emotions with your tone, disappointment being one of them. The unfolding of it all. Gonna be playing Rico Nasty all 2025. Hell yeah. Gemini is so everything everywhere all at once. My Gemini moon definitely needs some boundaries. Clocked me. Hey, mine does too in the first house. All I do is take in information. Like there was a day, I don't know if this was last week or the week before. I think it was the Monday before Christmas. Um Before I talked to y'all last week, actually, I was feeling so exhausted after work, and I had been listening to a really dense podcast discussion slash debate between two guys, and I just thought I was casually taking in information, and then by the time I got home, I like had a migraine kick in all of a sudden because I just thought I was taking in all this information and it wasn't affecting me, when really like it was wearing me out. I had to turn it off, child, and just sit in silence for my body to regulate because I was taking on so much stress just listening to them have this like tense argument with each other. Um and two, like we were talking about, just taking in the news all the time and like needing to constantly be informed, like that wears you out. And you really can't process that much information at once, you know? Like you think that you are, or you think that it's not that big of a deal, passive intake. And I'm speaking to all the Geminis here. But you miss a lot. You miss a lot, and your own emotional experience of taking in that information is relevant too. I was about to say with a Gemini moon though. Yeah. Y'all know. Y'all know. You do have Jupiter and Sag. Okay, yes. So yeah. We're also Aries and saying the same thing in different ways. Also that. Yeah. I'm so curious how Sag Jupiter feels as opposed to my Jupiter and Taurus. Yeah. Yeah, because I generally feel like Jupiter and Taurus, um, like I was in a relationship, as many of you know, for a long time with someone who has Jupiter and Taurus. And as much as they have their beliefs and things like that, they were always open to mine whenever I actually conveyed that we were coming from different contexts and talking about things differently or seeing things differently. Jupiter and Taurus is more likely to find the commonalities between our beliefs or ideas or identities or whatever it is. Whereas I'm usually looking for the differences from the Jupiter and Scorpio perspective. I'm expecting and anticipating that people are going to be different, think differently than me, when a lot of times they don't. Not as different as I think they are, not to the point where I feel like I'm totally, alienated, but I also grew up somewhere where I was absolutely the odd man out all the time. So that's a belief that I have that I carry with me, that I'm always going to be different. And that's not always the case. Virgo ascendant here clocked my teeth. South Node is putting pressure on everything. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Because South Node is in Virgo right now. Yeah. I feel like that's definitely been like a collective experience as well. You can hear it a lot whenever you listen to like right wingers, like Ben Shapiro, people like that, whenever they engage in debates with people. And the minute that you start to get emotional, they will use that against you. Like, oh, you're getting emotional about the argument now. Now the argument's invalid. When they've been emotional this whole time, they're just masking it. And then once they get emotional, they use that into like, well, that's just how I feel. And my feelings matter. My feelings are valid or whatever. And it's that they flip the script on you to make you invalid, but to make their to make space for their feelings. It's very sneaky. Don't let people do that to you. Just assume that they're emotional and they're hiding it. Cause bitch, you're a human. You're in a body. Don't lie to me. I can literally hear it. I heard that voice crack. Hello? I keep saying the wrong shit, but don't know I be saying the wrong shit. We're also both people of color. Black, and my coworker is non-binary Puerto Rican, and the supervisor was a white woman. Calm down, everybody. Just calm down, okay? No need for all of that. No fighting. No fighting. No, girl, we just loud. Gemini in my 10th house. That makes me think about all I'm taking in regarding that house. I got some homework to do. When I tell you the intake of info be sneaking up on a girl, it does. Helps me think about Jupiter differently. That Mercury in Scorpio on your Jupiter must have been a time. It has been a time. It's wearing me out. I'm tired of this shit. I'm tired of, like, it's helpful. Planets transiting Scorpio is always helpful for me because it does make me aware of how I'm moving through the world, like Jupiter in general. Like that's what I was saying in the beginning about beliefs. Like it's not beliefs in the sense that like you necessarily have some kind of structure. Sometimes that's part of it, a foundation of your belief systems and all those types of things, but it's also just like your internal narratives that you don't realize that you have. It's just an amalgamation of all the experiences that you've had. And then Sagittarius is kind of what you do with that experience, whereas Pisces is like the intuition that you get from like, oh, I know what this is. I've seen this before. It's just all of your life experiences combined in the story that you tell about those things, or the narratives or the ways that you speak about it. Like, one thing that I like to say is you can tell when you have a belief or a narrative or a bias about something whenever you say like, this always happens to me, or this never happens. Like when you go into the superlatives of, for me, like, nobody ever understands me. Like I could lean into that all day long as Jupiter and Scorpio. Nobody understands me. Nobody believes me. I'm always the different person. Like those can be narratives that I slip into whenever I'm feeling really triggered in my Jupiter sense. And that may not actually be the case in the moment. It may be that I'm not actually conveying myself properly. It may be that I'm not actually using my words. It may be that I'm making a lot of assumptions about people. Like when you catch yourself in a situation making an assumption, it's Jupiter. Jupiter is usually the one doing it. If you are anticipating something, Jupiter is usually the one doing it. If you're speculating, if you are um, suspicious, if any of those things, that's Jupiter usually trying to create meaning out of whatever experience it is that you're having. And then the flavor of that meaning is based on the sign that your Jupiter occupies, which is a great time to plug if you want to take my Astro 101 workshop in January. These are the types of things that I'm going to be teaching you about the planets. Link in my bio. So yeah. And Mercury then on the other side is usually not the belief itself. It is the message, the way that it's being conveyed. It's the message without the expectation in a way, or the message, the words itself. It's the speaker or the megaphone or the microphone or whatever it is. Mercury is the language, the words, the tone, like all of those things that convey meaning, or the information you can use to create meaning, but it's not usually the meaning itself. Unless, your Mercury is ruled by Jupiter, then there's more to talk about with that, but that gets a little bit more complicated for today's conversation. And yes, I do have iCals in my shop right now for 2025. I have both the lunar and the transit, the lunar and the aspect transit, whatever. All the iCals are in my shop, mixedmercuryastro.com/shop. If you want to go purchase those and get the iCals directly to your phone, to your device, so you can find out. I did forget to put today's new moon in, though. Not sure how it got deleted, but new moon in Sagittarius today. Okay. I think my Mercury and Sag crying. I think that's all I have to say today. I guess going back to the cards that I pulled. When will Mars and Cancer stop ruining my life? No shade. Yeah, Mars is going to move back into oh my gosh, words. Mars is going to move back into Gemini on January 20th, and then it will move back into Cancer. Actually, let me just give y'all all the retrograde dates coming up. So Mars in Gemini, January 20th. Mars stationary direct is, where is it? Mars will station direct on February 23rd, 2025. And then Mars will be back in Cancer, moving at regular speed. April 2nd. So y'all know Mars retrogrades last for fucking ever. But yeah, January 20th, Mars in Gemini. February 23rd, Mars stationary direct. And then April 2nd, Mars will be back in Cancer. And then we get Mars in Leo. Later. You should buy the iCals so you can find out. Okay, what else? Oh, the cards. Yeah. So I told you at the beginning of this conversation that I pulled Page of Cups with the Emperor on the bottom. Do you kind of see now how we got here? I kind of forgot. I think I said the interpretation verbatim at one point without even realizing it, but it had something to do with like... It had something to do, excuse me, with I think that's actually the boundary of getting off of the emotional roller coaster. And I know the Emperor does keep coming up. I feel like the Emperor comes up a lot. I'll just talk through this. I feel like the Emperor comes up a lot with Taurus transits because it's very easy to like submit when planets are in Taurus, like to submit to the expectation or to assimilate or to become whatever somebody else wants you to become instead of standing on business and being yourself. And some of that requires emotional boundaries, Scorpio. Some of that requires like um just a strong sense of self. Because Emperor to me, I know this isn't a traditional description of it, but Emperor to me is very Leo. Like being your own authority, like stand up, stand up, you know. I think Dana used to describe it that way a lot too, and that just always resonated with me. Like it's the stand on business card. And so that with Page of Cups, that being the context for Page of Cups is kind of like that thing we were talking about with kind of understanding your own emotional projections and dispositions and patterns and things like that. And also like having a sense of curiosity about that and towards other people too. Like allowing yourself to change um how you feel with new information, or that your feelings change with new information, or even just like your perspective. Your perspective, not your perspective. Well, kind of. You do gain perspective with new beliefs, that whole thing. Uh but ultimately just like once you understand how your emotions drive your behaviors, especially whenever it comes to belonging and being in relationship with other people, the Emperor is kind of like, hey, quit that shit. Um, you know who you are, you know how you feel, you know what you want out of this relationship. Like create some structure and some boundaries for yourself in order to maintain that, or in order to enforce that for yourself. Again, because this is not about convincing and changing other people. It's about how you carry yourself in the relationship. And having some acceptance of yourself around that. I don't know. That's what I think. If y'all think something else, y'all can put it in the chat. But that's kind of all I have to say. I think I'm gonna go for another bike ride today. I went for a bike ride yesterday after a little microdose trip, and microdosing is just so great. It unlocks your brain. It definitely gets me out of negative thought patterns because I was in some I was down in the dumps a little bit this weekend and letting the shame monster overtake me. And then it was just like, why though? You're pretty cool. Why not show people that you're pretty cool? And then the people who agree with you that you're pretty cool will stick around, and the people who don't agree will go away. And why would you want them around anyway? I don't want people around me who don't think I'm cool. Hello? The fuck? Radical self belief. Yeah, I like that too. Radical self belief. That's a nice little new moon in Sag word, I think, for us. Radical self belief. But yeah, I think the main thing the main thing about all of this for me was perspective changing your beliefs. Like I wanted to share that because I was talking to my dad. I ended up just spending Christmas with my dad, and we had a long, deep and vulnerable conversation actually that I wasn't expecting and wasn't totally sure if it was going to happen. And mind you, like I'm an only child, right? Me and my parents have always sat and had conversations, especially around the holidays or just in low stakes situations where we're talking about, whatever. We talk about the world in a big, broad sense, and then we kind of narrow it down to each other at some point. And I got a lot of insight on him and my mom, especially whenever it comes to me having transitioned, and just a lot of the conflict that we've had over the last 4 years of me basically shedding the layers of shedding the layers of the persona that I've been putting on all this time, and the projections that I've taken on over the years, and how I've just decided to be my own person. And I've always kind of decided to be my own person, but transitioning is really like it's a level of self-determination that makes other people uncomfortable. And my dad basically said it straight up, just saying this neutrally, that it is jarring, even when you watch it happen slowly over time, to physically see somebody change into somebody else, you know. And in theory, it seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal because the person underneath the skin, my soul, my personality really hasn't changed. I understand for some people it does change, but for me, I'm still the same. I just look different on the outside, and it can be hard to reconcile that, from a person on the outside looking in. And I remember that being something that I was really afraid of, that kept me from transitioning for a long time. Was like, I was in a partnership at the time, romantic partnership, just as like a non-binary person, but it became increasingly true to me. Um, the last two relationships I was in actually is when I realized more of my trans slowly over time. And that was over the course of 4 years. And it was really scary to me to think that, I'm going to change into the person that I want to be, that I believe that I am. And this other person is going to have to decide if that's someone that they want to be in relationship with. Because it's, people don't agree with this. I kind of understand whenever people are like, this is not what I signed up for. Like if you are a lesbian and you signed up to be in a relationship with another woman, and then the other woman you're in a relationship decides that he's a trans man. I was very, um what's the word, I was very defensive about that for a really long time, because I felt like, you fell in love with a person, you didn't just fall in love with the body or an appearance. And I mean, you do kind of fall in love with an appearance, like, let's be honest, but you fall in love with a person, and people also change. So this is true for any relationship. People also change over time. But I can understand that the other person in the relationship who isn't transitioning, or who isn't making the change to their identity or whatever it is, their appearance or whatever it is, like, has to decide if that's what they want or if it's not what they want. And you kind of have to let them. Because again, why would you want to be in relationship with somebody who doesn't really accept you and see you for who you are? And that kind of goes back to the whole Scorpio thing of like emotional boundaries. And if I'm allowed to feel how I feel, you're allowed to feel how you feel. And sometimes that involves you rejecting this relationship. I have to be willing to let that happen. I can't control you. So anyway, I say all of that to say I was talking to my dad, um, and he was just telling me about his experience of me transitioning, because I haven't been very open to their experience of me transitioning. I've had to really be protective of my perception of myself, because all this time I've been a little too Leo, a little too in other people's head about me. So I had to detach. Back to that word, I had to actively detach from their perception of me in order to become myself. And now that we're trying to reconnect, I have to allow them to adjust. And a lot of that means like they have to have their own journey of grieving and of shedding their perception of me and all that other kind of stuff um in order to see me as my authentic self. And that's a process. So all of that to the Aquarius point of like, sometimes, and saying this, the astrology of this being Saturn in Aquarius, Venus in Aquarius, to Jupiter and Taurus, to Sag new moon. If I hold on to the belief that nobody sees me, nobody accepts me, I'm too different, whatever, then I'm always going to think that whoever I'm in relationship with is going to reject me. But if I change my perspective to say that I have to be myself no matter what, I will never trust that the people I'm in relationship with actually see me and love me and know me if I don't let them see me. I have to be willing to be rejected, or I have to be willing to let other people disagree with me, or I have to be willing to let other people just have their perspective, basically. But if I can at least understand what it is that they are seeing and that they are experiencing, that can allow me to change my belief a little bit, because it's not just what I'm seeing, it's not just my perspective. I have to also be willing to see their perspective too. So, um, maybe it doesn't change the outcome, but it can change your emotional relationship to the outcome. Gonna have to watch the replay, but I wanted to say, hey, please watch the replay and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't liked the video already, oh my gosh, I haven't said this the whole time, but please like the video. Can you read me a book? Your voice is so soothing to me. I would love to. When we were on Clubhouse, when we were on Clubhouse in some of our like late night rooms, I would seductively read recipes to the group just because it was entertaining. But I do like to read to people. I would do that. I appreciate that compliment though. Thank you. I look forward to remembering that authority note and radical self-belief with the South Node going into Leo. Yeah, actually. Yeah, I feel like that theme definitely follows us into Leo and Aquarius themes definitely follow us into 2025 with the eclipses. An audiobook would be fire. I think it's a beautiful thing to witness. I appreciate that. I think it is too. I mean, I think I can understand it. Like I think changing your appearance, this is also very Taurus, but I think changing your appearance is scary. Can be scary. And allowing people to see you differently is scary. But, you know, how else are they gonna see you if you don't show them? I don't know. That's what I keep saying. I keep seeing the phrase "let them" all over the place. Yeah. Had to stop to write some notes, but I'm back. Welcome back. I have to allow them to adjust. I need to take some notes as well. So real. Thank you for this entire tender word. No problem. If the relationship doesn't work, avoiding the spiral of "I won't get another chance," then it can never happen. It can happen. Wait, let me start over. If the relationship doesn't work, avoiding the spiral of "I won't get another chance," then it can happen even better next time. Yeah. Capricorns run into this problem a lot. Not to air myself out, but that whole scarcity mindset. I think Scorpio and Capricorn together, especially, but even in their own ways, can be really bad about this. I have both. I'm telling on myself, but that feeling of like, oh my god, nobody's ever gonna love me again. I need this. I have to keep this one person in this one relationship, even though it's not really everything that I want in a relationship. But I'm never gonna get another relationship again because all these things I believe about myself. So I'm just gonna have to make this work. Like, please, please, please don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. And don't I don't know who this is for, but don't rush into and also like completely enmesh with somebody when you first meet them for that same reason. I think that's the Cancer side of the Capricorn thing, because Capricorn is operating from the scarcity of like, I may not ever have this again, so I need to hold on to it really tight. But I also think Cancer can kind of do the like, oh my god, this feels so good, I need to take it all in at once, because what if I don't have it anymore later? Because there's something about knowing that the emotions are fleeting, I think, on both ends of the spectrum, but that the emotional highs at the very least are fleeting. So you want to like make it last as long as possible, or like get the most out of it in the moment, when in reality, like sometimes it's gonna suck to be in this relationship, and sometimes it's gonna be great to be in this relationship, and you gotta kind of like, you gotta vacillate between the both of them and stay in the relationship, provided everything else is healthy. So there's no such thing as a finite resource to a Cancer. That's a T, but that's the thing again about opposites not really being opposites. Like they're both trying to make this shit last as long as possible, Whether it's Cancer trying to make the highs and the good feelings last as long as possible, and Capricorn trying to just make the thing itself, period, last as long as possible. Um, and I think both also have their ways of like, back to the whole emotional roller coaster and habituating chaos thing. I think they both also have their ways of learned helplessness where it feels bad as long as possible too, because something about that is validating to you, child. Um, Nobody likes to talk about that, but sometimes we do wallow in self-pity as well, and that's not healthy either. Changing the emotional relationship to the outcome, definitely. Yes. Yeah, well, exactly. You just got to remember, like, especially dealing with cardinal transits, you just got to remember, like, unless it's death, and even death, this is a wild thing to say, I'm gonna say it anyway, but you can handle the outcome, whatever it is. Like, what was something else my dad said to me? My dad has Saturn and Capricorn, by the way, and a lot of cardinal placements in a Pisces stellium with Jupiter there. But he said, he's like, you've survived 100% of your worst days. And I was like, yeah, I think somebody else has said that too, but it's very Saturn to me. Like, yeah, that bad thing happened and you survived it. You felt like shit about it for a real long time. And then eventually you moved on. You've survived 100% of your worst days. And even when you die, even death, like, you'll get over that too, because you won't have to think about it. You won't have to feel a way about it because you'll be dead. So even that you'll get through. It's out of your control anyway. Morbid, right? I'm the Capricorn though in the room, so it'd be like that. Sometimes you'll get through it. It's gonna suck. Don't avoid the suck. Don't avoid the suck feeling. Don't avoid you'll get over it, like, you'll be okay. It's gonna suck for a minute, but you'll be okay. You will move on. You will grow around that feeling. It's not that it'll go away. You'll grow around it. And that's, not only will you grow around it, but you'll learn something from it too. Because that's just how we are. So anyway, okay, it's 1:30. That's all I got. I think this was nice. I hope this is helpful to you as you navigate the rest of the week and the next like month and a half, because more planets are going to enter Capricorn. By the way, my birthday is in 2 weeks. Well, it's on January the 14th. And I was talking to Samaje about this, that I want to have a little online birthday gathering where we read my solar return chart. I've never done that before, but I think it would be fun. So if you want to read my solar return chart, it'll be free. It's not like a paid event, but it'll just be a Zoom. Hang out with me on my birthday, because it's on a Tuesday. I have to work that day, so it'll probably be on a Wednesday. But hang out with me. Let's read my solar return chart and just kiki a little bit. And if you want to gift me words of affirmation, you can. It's my love language. I would love to hear it. And maybe I'll read to you. Who knows? Cool. I'll post a link for that sometime soon as well. So yeah, other than that, again, like the video, 30% off sale until January 2nd. Use the code HOLIDAY in my shop, 30% off of all readings. Astrology, what is it called? I keep forgetting the name of my own workshop. Sidereal Astrotherapy 101, January 26th. I will release the flyer for that sometime this week as well. $10, $5 for for Patreon members. And yeah, birthday Zoom on January the 14th. Not sure what time. Not on January the 14th, probably the 15th. Not sure what time, but I'll let you know. Yeah, that's it. Okay, I love y'all. Bye. Bye.